Hello, grade 12. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so in today's video, I'll just be taking a different approach. So I've been getting a lot of requests from you guys saying that, could you please walk us through the question paper? Not necessarily solve just like you do, because with me, guys, I always preach the message of solving a bunch of question papers. So you just choose question papers from that 5-year range, from away from your current year. So that is 2022, 2021, 2020, 2019, and 2018. So you'd just try to solve a lot of questions from that time range so that you at least increase the chances of having to excel in your exam. And then also to pick out the trend, guys, because when they set an exam, it's based on a particular trend. So if you have seen a lot of questions from that 5-year time range, then your chances of having to excel in an exam would obviously increase, because now you are less anxious about what is expected of you in an exam. You already know what is expected of you in an exam, and you already know the structure of an exam. So you get there in an exam room, you know what to expect, right? So this is just the benefit of having to apply that strategy. So to just put some evidence on the strategy, and then to show you the strategy, walk you through the strategy, I'll just be using 3 past papers. So from 2020, we have one from 2020, and then we also have another one from 2021. So all these are November papers, because you're going to be writing your November paper now. So, and then also November 2022, this is the one that was written last year. Okay, so to walk you through the strategy, guys, let's start with this. So obviously, when you walk into the exam, they're going to read you the instructions and information. So by now, you already know that you wrote your June exams, you wrote your March exams, you also wrote your prelims. So let's just skip through this part. And then now you have your question 1. You know that you expect that any grade 12 learner that is doing mathematics knows that question 1 is algebra. And the first question 1.1 will be the basic solve for X that you'll ever see, right? So we know with that one, it's even 2 marks. So if you were to solve this one, it's simple. So, okay, I won't be solving much of the questions, because I'm just walking you through the questions, right? So with this one, obviously the approach is to factor out the X here. So to approach this one, you'd factor out the X here, and then you'd be left with X minus 6, and then equal to 0. So that's the approach with this one, 2 marks. So for saying X is equals to 0, or X is equals to 6, this would be your 2 marks, right? So it is as basic as that. Then 1.1.2, we have this x squared plus 10x plus 8 is equals to 0, and then we can see that it is in a quadratic format. So we know that we have to use our quadratic formula, mostly because they will tell us correct to 2 decimal places. So this is a hint on its own to tell us that we need to use quadratic equation. So from here, you know that you just have to collect your A is 1, your B is 10, and your C is 8. Now, guys, math papers do have a formula sheet. So if you can just scroll down, right? So in your case, you won't be scrolling down, you will just be turning over your page to the last page there. So when you go to the last page there, you have your formula sheet. So there's no such thing as in maths, we are not given formulas. That's why maths is hard. So you do have your formula there. And then you can see, there we go there. That's the formula that you're going to use. That's the quadratic formula. Then if you go back there, so to answer that, you'll just be using that. And then let's continue. 1.1.3, we know that it's going to be on inequalities. So for inequalities, we know that if the sign, this one, you'd solve it the same way as you do with solve for X. So just equating each bracket to 0 here. But then in a way, you shouldn't do like this: 1 minus x is equals to 0, because remember the sign. So you'd kind of do it by the side and then just give us the answers. So for this one, obviously your answer would be x is equals to 1 or x is equals to -2. So your -2 being the smallest value, and then your 1 being the maximum value. Now, the trick with this one, you don't have to kind of do this the whole night. You just have to know that if the sign is facing that side, the kind of inequality that you're going to have is this, whereby here you'll have your minimum value, and then here you'll have your maximum value. So it's always like that. When your sign is facing that side, then your answer will appear like this. But if your sign was facing that side, let's say it was greater than 0, then you were going to have your inequalities separated like that. So it's always the approach. So the only thing that you need to know here is to know how to get your values, which is the same thing as solving for x. And then you have to decide whether you use this notation or you use that notation based on the signs that you are given. So remember, when facing that side, this is the inequality sign. When facing that side, this becomes the inequality sign that you use. So it's just as easy like that, guys. So, okay, and then we will have our 1.1.4 here. So for this one, we know this is the one on SATs, whereby we know that in order to solve this, we have to get rid of the square root here. So we obviously get rid of the square root by squaring both sides of the equation. So you're going to square this side and you're going to square that side. Now we know the square here gets rid of the square root, but then the square here kind of doubles this one. So it expands on that one. And then you just have to do your FOIL here and end up solving for x. So obviously this will end up being something like in quadratic form, whereby you'll get 2x values. Now, the case with this one is that if it's 5 marks here, you're going to have 2x values, but one of the x value will not satisfy the equation. So you have to go back and test the x values to see if both the x values satisfy the equation. And then you'd have to cancel out the value that does not satisfy the equation. And that's how you approach the question. And then we know after that, there will be a question on simultaneous. It's always there. Now, I always say with simultaneous equation, it's just a matter of approaching it from the simplest equation. So you'll be given 2 equations. And then looking at these equations, you'll name them. So this will be your equation 1 here. And then this will be your equation number 2. Now, we can both agree that equation number 2 looks complicated, but equation number 1 is simple, right? Then you would choose to solve it from equation number 1. Then also in equation number 1, you should choose which variable should you make the subject of the formula. Now, for this one, because the coefficients are equal, it's 1 and 1, you can choose to make any the subject of the formula. You can choose to make x the subject of the formula, or you make y the subject of the formula. It really doesn't matter. But let's say now the coefficients were not equal. Let's say maybe you had a case like this. Now here it would make sense to make x the subject of the formula since it has the smallest coefficient. So if you wanted to make y the subject of the formula, you do understand that eventually you'd have to divide, you'd have to take this x over to this side and divide both the sides of the equation by 2, which will then end you up with a fraction. Now, when you have a fraction, you are complicating the equation. So the point of this is not to overcomplicate the equation. You are trying to work out from the simplest equation so that you can find a way to only deal with one variable from this complicated equation here. So always, if you have a case like this, try to make the one with the smallest coefficient the subject of the formula. Now, we know that after you have solved that, you need to have a question that is either on nature of roots or exponents. So it's either in grade 12, it's either you'll have a question on nature of roots, or you'll have a question here on exponents. So for this year 2020, we were given exponents, so whereby you need to solve this. So to solve this, we can pretty much see that this would work out with with logs, right? So if you can use logs here, you can get this one. So out of a total of 22, let's say maybe you do not get this one. So you can still walk out with a decent mark there. So you can still walk out with 22 minus 3. So you can still walk out with 19. So 19 divided by 22, that's 86% of the question. So you still have a decent mark there. So if question 1 is that simple, just get all the 22 marks. So it ranges, it can be 22, it can be 24, 25, just the range is within 22s and 25s there, right? So make sure that you get almost 80 to 90% of the question, if not 100%, guys. Then you have your question 2. With your question 2, you know that you are expecting to get a arithmetic sequence. So you have your arithmetic sequence there. So it can be sequence, it can be series, but then it will be arithmetic, right? So just anything on arithmetic. Then we know that with arithmetic, they can try to mix it up with quadratic equation, because one thing that you know is that the first difference of a quadratic equation is actually the arithmetic sequence, right? So they can try to mix it up with quadratic number pattern. So you should expect that as they did with this question here. So it takes you back to grade 11, whereby you have to solve this quadratic equation using the fact that you can find the differences in here, which will give you your first difference, and then this will give you your second difference. And then here you equate this to 2a, the second difference to 2a, and then the first difference to 3a plus b. And then this values here, you equate one of them to a plus b plus c. So now the approach is to always equate with the first terms here, right? So you will remember that from your grade 11. And then also with your arithmetic, if they give you this, you know that you have to find your difference here by taking the second term minus the first term, take the third term minus the second term, like that. So it's always the one that is forward minus the one that is that is at the back. So x minus 7, and then y minus x, and then negative 11 minus y. But then since we know that this gives you the common difference, so we know that you can equate them to find your values there, right? So that's it with your question 2. So this one, if you know your formulas, you know the approach, you shouldn't be complaining too much about this. Maybe you can get yourself a decent let's say out of that 17 marks, you can get yourself maybe 14 marks. Let's say maybe you don't manage to get the last question here, but then if you try to approach it, maybe you can get a mark or 2 from that. So let's say 17 minus 3, right? So let's say you get 14 marks. So you have the 19 from that, you have 14. So you are at 33 marks, right? So we are considering that you are maybe making mistakes somewhere, right? Then question 3, we know that is based on your geometric sequence. So with geometric sequence, it's not really much of a problem. You just have to know the questions that they will ask you. There might be a question that will ask you about converging a geometric series, whereby you know that you have to find your constant ratio, and then after finding your constant ratio, you substitute it in here to find the x values or whatever k value that they're looking for there. So they want you to prove that this is a convergent geometric series. Now for this one, if you can prove that your R is within the values -1 to +1, then you would have proven that. Now for this, you can see that this leads you to a sum to infinity. Then if you can just look at those questions, these 3 marks, I think This 3 mark can be quite easy to get. Also, this 5 marks, guys, if you know what you are doing and then you approach it well, you can also get that 5 marks. So for this one, I can be pretty sure that you can get all this 8 marks, guys. Come on, it's only geometric series. Then we have question 4. With question 4, now we can see that you have what we call functions. What is this type of function? Hyperbola function. Now with hyperbola function, I've went through the questions that they ask here. Usually I tell you that with this question here, it's anything within this 5 here. So they will ask for the axis of symmetry. We know that they will ask a question on the axis of symmetry. So the one with the negative gradient or positive gradient, they will ask questions based on you having to find the intercept. So either the x-intercept or the y-intercept, and then they will ask you to get the equation of the asymptotes. So equation of the asymptotes, which we know we have 2 asymptotes here, the vertical asymptote and the horizontal asymptote. So basically we know it's within this, right? So your vertical asymptote being x is equals to 1 because you need to take this one, equate it to 0, and then it will be x positive 1. But then the number in here, you take it as it is. So this would be y is equals to 2. This becomes your horizontal asymptote. Now you have axis of symmetry, intercept, equations of the asymptote. You also have to expect a question on the range and domain. So they will obviously ask about the range or domain, and then also expect a question on sketching, right? So with the sketch, we know that you have to include the intercept, you have to include the equations of the asymptote. So include your asymptote and also the intercept. Also, in the statement, it is there. They tell you what to include there. So you can see sketch the graph of H showing the asymptotes and the intercept with the axis, right? So you can see the questions there that are within that range. So you must just get a total on this one. There's no excuse with hyperbola functions. There's just no excuse. Then we know that following the hyperbola function will be the parabola function, which also again here for the parabola, you have to know how to get the intercepts. You have to know how to get the intercepts. You have to know how to calculate the turning point. You have to know how to find the equation, right? Find the equation. So sometimes you won't be given the equation of the parabola. So you need to know how to find the equation of the parabola. So you can find the equation of the parabola using the root form equation. So we know with the root form equation, that's when you do this, x minus x1, x minus x2. So you only use this approach if you are given the intercepts here, right? And any other given point. So the any other given point can be in the form of a y-intercept. And then also, if you're not given the intercept, you can find the equation of the asymptote using the turning point form. So TP form. So by saying ax minus p and then square here plus q, where your p and q would be the coordinates of the turning point. So that's if you are given the turning points here. So that's if you are given the turning point and you are given any other point. So that can be in the form of the y-intercept in most of the cases. Now also expect a question on range. So we know that the range, if your equation is like this will be y greater or equal to the minimum value here. So the turning point. So it's y greater or equals to the y coordinate of the minimum value, or the y coordinate of the minimum value. And then if it's like this is y less than or equal to the y coordinate of the maximum value, right? So it's always like that with the range. So you know how to get the intercept, you know how to find the equation, you know how to calculate the range, and other questions that will be there will be on where is the graph increasing, where is, yeah, where is it increasing, where is it decreasing. So usually I don't see a lot of sketching the graph questions in grade 12. That was in grade 11, but then in grade 12, they hardly require you to sketch a parabola graph. So you know those things. And also that there's questions, guys, whereby they start to mention the tangent. They start to mention tangents there. If they ever mention tangents, guys, just know the relationship between a parabola graph and the tangent, right? So you know that if you get f prime x, this would be equivalent to your tangent, right? So at that particular point, if they tell you the gradient of, they want the gradient of the tangent, you can just say maybe they give you a point here, it's -2, and they say they want the equation of the gradient here. So you know that you can just derive the f prime, the f of x, the parabola graph, and then substitute the x coordinate to that derivative equation so that you find the gradient at this point, right? Then when you find the gradient, you can use that to find the equation of the tangent, right? So that is a question that is kind of mixed with your differential calculus. So yeah, so those are the questions, and then sometimes they ask you about the inverse, so we can see questions on the inverse here. So you'd have to know that, oh, still on that topic, yes, they're talking about the tangent here. So you'd have to figure out the tangent there. And then question five, we have one that is on exponential. So this is exponential function. Now we know exponential functions, they always go hand in hand with logarithm. So there's no exponential graph without a logarithmic graph. So you know that this is exponential together with logarithmic graph. So exponential logarithmic graph being the inverse of the exponential graph. So sometimes they might give you the logarithmic graph and then they want you to find the exponential graph, or they give you the exponential graph, they want you to find the logarithmic graph. So always know that they go hand in hand. So with this one also, there's no excuse. The questions that they ask here is always to write the coordinates that will be the intercepts here, which you can find that. We know that if you want to find the y-intercept, you just make x 0, right? So we know that if you just put 0 here, any number raised to the exponent of 0 is 1, right? So the intercept here will always be 0 is to 1. And then if of course the graph is not shifted otherwise. So as you can see here, the graph is not shifted, so the coordinate there is supposed to be 0 is to 1. Now, if it was shifted, obviously you'd have to also consider that shifting. Then from there, they're asking you to calculate the coordinates of B, which we can see. Once again, the coordinates of B are the x-intercept. If you want the x-intercept, you just make y 0, which should be easier to approach. Then also expect questions on domain and range here. So they will obviously ask you questions on domain and range. Know the relationship between the domain and range of the exponential and logarithmic graph. So with the exponential graph, we know that this graph is like that. So whereby it has, so if I can just draw the original graph, we know that with the exponential graph, the asymptote is always this line here, which is y is equals to 0, because we know with exponential graphs, you can never have a negative output, right? So even if you say 2 to the exponent of -2, the resulting answer cannot be a negative. So it is always positive. Hence, you see the original graph is always above the x-axis. But then with the logarithmic graph, the asymptote here in this logarithmic graph becomes the x-axis, right? So it has an asymptote at x is equals to 0 like that. So always know that if you have let's say a question on log or an equation or on log, then you have log 2, and then you try to substitute a negative value here. What you'll get is that your calculator will just say maths error, because you cannot have your x value for log being a negative, right? So it's an inverse like that. So know that relationship, and then what happens. So if this is an inverse, for example, if you have a coordinate here is 0:1, then we know that the coordinate in here must be 1:0, because it's the inverse. Remember, inverse means y must be equal to x and x must be equal to y, right? So know how to write that equation to change the exponential graph to a logarithmic graph using y is equals to x. And then now you can determine the domain for that. And then there will also be questions on translation. So they need to see the translation of that. Now, if you can check this one, our equation for f of x was equals to 3 is negative x. Now, this one we are given as h of x is equals to 27 over 3 to the exponent of x, which can be written as 3 to the exponent of negative x. And then if we write the 27 in exponential form, this becomes 3 to the exponent of 3. And then this is 3 negative x plus 3, right? Then you have to know this approach. Before you can answer anything on translation, try to write this in standard form, right? So the standard form is always in the form of a is equals to a, b, x plus p, and then plus q, right? So always try to write this in that form, so that you can see the changes that have been made. Now, moving from here to this, you can see that this is a translation or a shift of the graph 3 units to the left. Remember, it's plus 3. So if it's plus 3 here, it is going to the left, right? So that's how you see that. And then for this one, determine the value of x for which h of x is less than 1. Then you'd obviously have to take this equation and then equate it to this inequality or express it in that inequality. So now you'd be done with your functions. So let's see, we were at 33. We were at 33 marks. And then because we said there are no excuses on this one, so already from solving the 2 that you were at 33, so no excuses on this one. You would have 33 plus, this will give you 8. And then let's say on this question here, you'd get most of the question. Let's say maybe you cannot get this one, the area, right? And then maybe also you fail this one, maybe you just approach it, you get 2 marks. So you'd have the 8, and then let's add the 2 there. This 2, then let's add the 1. Let's add the 3 here. And then let's skip this 3. Let's say you get the 2. Then let's say from approaching this, leaving it somewhere there, you get a 2. Now you are at 51. So already 30% of the paper from here. And then when we get to question 5, no excuses as well. No excuses, right? So let's say maybe you did not get this one because now you did not understand translation and what so not. So let's say maybe you end up with 9 marks, right? So now you are at 60 marks, right? So question 5, still on question 5. Then question 6 is financial maths. Now, you know, with financial maths, as long as you can read your statements correctly, and then you do whatever that they tell you, right, you can get this marks, right? You can get this marks because we know with this first one, what will the investment be worth immediately after the last deposit? So this is on investment. Already, you know, this is on future value. So they tell you he continues to make monthly deposits. So they tell you about monthly deposits of 1,000 rand. So the approach with this one always, guys, when you read the statement, Tepo made the first of his monthly deposit of 1,000 rand. So this becomes our X, our monthly deposit. And then savings account, it continues to make monthly deposits of 1,000 at the end of each month up until 31 January. So now we are saying, okay, 2020 to 2020 to 2032. So you have to get the difference in years there. So you'd say 2032 minus 2020. We know that the difference there is 12 years. But then they said monthly, right? So 12 years, you have to write this 12 years in terms of months. That's 12 times 12. That gives you 144 months. That means there were 144 payments that were made or that will be made, right? Because we haven't reached 2032. Then the interest rate was fixed at 7.5%. Now you know this is your I, but then you should write it. In fact, this is your R. So if you want your I, you should write it as R over 100, right? So whereby you say 7.5 divided by 100. So always you must put this value here as a decimal. So that would give you 0. You say 7.5 divided by 100, that's 0.075, right? So that will be your I, right? Compounded monthly. Now you know your I should be, it should be I over 12. The same as here you had N multiplied by 12. So the number of years multiplied by 12 gave you 144. Also, again, because it's compounded monthly, you should have 12. Now, if you know your formula for future value, it is there. So do not find yourself having to write the incorrect value or the incorrect formula meant to say, because the formulas are given. Once again, the formulas are given. So just go check there for the future value formula. You can see, so this is present value, this is it. Future value formula, it's here, right? So it always hurts me, guys, when you are looking at question papers and then people have answered, but then they wrote the wrong formula, and you start to ask yourself, isn't it that people don't see that there's a formula sheet at the back of the question paper? So do not make that mistake. Do not lose precious marks just like that because you couldn't look at the formula sheet. Then 6.1.2 says if he makes no further payment but leaves the money in the account, how much money will be in the account on 31 January 2033, right? So this is 2 marks. We can see that this is a question on you having to use this formula here because you are just leaving the money there. Remember, when do you get to use this formula? For lump sums, right? So if you're just investing your money, I have this 10,000 that are that is just sitting here at home. I do not have any use for it. I just put it in the bank in a savings account to earn interest. I'm not making any monthly deposits for this one. I'm just simply putting my money in the bank and then let it earn interest. So it's a lump sum, right? But then with the future value formula, you have monthly deposits, or rather regular deposits, because it's not only monthly, right? It can be semi-annually, it can be quarterly. Yeah, so it's like that. Then with this one, you are just leaving the money there. So after getting that future value from 6.1.1, you should obviously take that money and then put it here. So that money there will be the principal amount because it's being invested. So from 2032 to 2033, that's 12 months in between. So you'd have your 12 here, right? You'd have your 12, and then just like that, you'd have your 2 marks. Then 6.2, Jim bought a new car for 250,000. The value of the car depreciated at a rate of 22% PA annually, according to the reducing balance method. After how many years will its book value be that and that? Right, so we know, number one, reducing balance method. A is equals to P1 minus I to the exponent of n. This is the reducing balance method. Jim bought a new car for 250,000. That's your P immediately. And then the book value, that is your A, right? And then now I'm looking for the rate of depreciation. It's 22%. Now, am I worried about compounding periods here? No, because there's no such thing as something depreciating over a monthly basis or over a quarterly basis. When something depreciates, it depreciates over an annual basis, right? So if you are doing accounting, you know that, right? And then so this is it. You are just substituting in your values like that, and then you are getting what do they want here after how many years? So you are getting your n, right? So you know every time we are calculating for n, we are using logs. We are using logs, right? So you know that you have to first divide that by p, and then you'll be left with 1 minus I to the exponent of n, and then obviously to get your log, this would be log 1 minus I and then a over p, right? Then this is how you'd get your n value. This is how you'd get your n value. Okay, then let's proceed. Then 6.3 says employee is granted a loan. So immediately we see the word loan, we know that's present value, right? So present value for loans. And then here we are clearly given everything that we need. The interest rate is 11.3%. So that's our R. We need to write it as I over we need to write it so if we want our I, we need to write it as R over 100. Yes. And then since they said compounded monthly, we're then going to say I over 12. And then the period of the loan is 6 years. But then since they said compounded monthly, we know immediately 6 multiplied by 12, because we need to write this in terms of months, right? So this gives us 72 months. Then the monthly repayment of the loan is 1,005. This is our X. So you see, with financial maths, as long as you can extract your data very well, then there shouldn't be any complaint about that. Her first payment is made 1 month after the loan is granted, as per expected. You cannot you cannot be asking for a loan or on that particular month and start to pay on that month. It doesn't happen like that. You always pay the month after. But with an investment, you can do that. You can be out there asking about an investment, and then if you have the money with you right away, you can just start to invest right away. So we say the statement usually says he started investing immediately. So you know that you have to start your investment at T0, not at T1, right? Then calculate the value of the loan, obviously 3 marks. So you have to use your present value formula, which is given in the formula sheet. Then how much interest will Mpo pay in total over the first 5 years? Now, to calculate the interest, when you have that, we know that the interest, because when you are making those monthly deposits, you're going to end up paying more. So the formula becomes the period multiplied by the investment, the monthly investment, or the monthly payments, meant to say. So it's the period, which will be your 72 months, multiply that by the monthly installments you'll be making of 1,005. Then you're going to have to subtract that. You're going to have to subtract your present value, but then your present value that should be subtracted is for 5 years, because they clearly state here for the first 5 years. So that means this includes you having to calculate the present value for the first 5 years, and then do this, take the 72 multiplied by the 1.5 and then subtract that. Then you would have. So here, if you know your stuff, once again, you should be able to get, with this one, I always say, guys, just get the whole 16 marks, please. Okay, but then we are at 60. Let's say maybe this one could have bambered you with the washings. So you would say 60 plus, let's say, minus this 4 will end up getting 12. So that's 60 plus 12. Now we are at 72, right? Okay, so then we have this question 7 here. Determine f prime x from first principles if f of x is equals to 2x squared minus 1. Now, guys, we know this one, no. This one is a mark for everyone. Even that child that is there at the back of the class that doesn't care about attending, they can get this one. This one, they can get this one. So there's 5 marks already in the bag, right? And then using rules, guys, using rules now cannot be discussing this, right? So here, if you use your rules, the one thing that you need to know, you cannot use rules on things that are on SATs. So you have to take them out of the SAT, then 2/5, and then plus x cube, right? So this is still d over dx. And then now you try to do this, then you'd have your mark. And then for this one, if you are given something like this, you know that the first thing to do is to try to solve here, right? So that you have it in you have only one equation there to deal with. So we are given in fraction, and once again, you cannot derive this when what it's did in fractions like that. But then if you look at this, you can see that this is difference of two squares, because 4 is a perfect number, perfect square, and then 9 is a perfect square. So you have 2x minus 3, and then here you have 2x plus 3. Now with this, you know that you are always aiming to cancel out some of the stuff here that would be left. So if you are looking at this, you can see that there is a common factor of 2, and then this will give you if you factor out 2, you'll be left with 2x here and then plus 3. At this moment, you can see that this and this will cancel out. So you'll be left with what? You'll be left with 2x minus 3 over 2. Guys, this one you should get. So if you happen to have questions like this, just know this is the approach. Then you can just try to separate here 2x over 2 and then 3 over 2 like that. Now you can see what will happen. You will now be left with what? X minus 3 over 2, right? And then now, if you are trying to derive this, remember this is still f of x because you haven't derived. So you are still writing f of x. Then if you derive this, then your f prime x is just equal to what? 1. Wow. See? So it's just like that. Now they're saying where your x should not be equals to negative 3 over 2. Because apparently if it's negative 3 over 2 here, the whole denominator will just be 0 here. So if you can substitute this value here, you'll get your denominator as 0. And you know, if you get your denominator as 0, then it becomes a non-real number. So it's it's non-real. Then let's say on this one you get this 5, you get this 3, and then you get 8 marks, right? So let's say maybe this one kind of gave you a challenge, don't know. So you have an 8 there. So you'd be seated at 80 now. And then you have your question 8, which is cubic function. So cubic functions, again, they should be easy at this point. You should know how to solve your cubic functions with ease, right? So you know the questions that you expect there, they're going to be questions on having to calculate the intercepts there, find this intercept, find maybe the coordinates of the turning point, which we know if we want to find the coordinates of the stationary point, we just have to derive this to first derivative and then equate to 0, then get the x values, take the x values to the original formula, and then to get the point of inflection can be calculated in so many ways. You can, if you have your equation already, you can use this to get your x coordinate of the point of inflection, take that x coordinate. So here they're just asking for the x coordinate, but if they also want the y coordinate, take that x coordinate, go back to the original equation. So obviously at this point you would have got your A, your B, your C, right? And then you have that, or you can simply use the midpoint. You can calculate the midpoint of the x coordinates of the turning point, because here you are just using the fact that the point of inflection is just the axis of symmetry of the parabola graph. So if you can just check here, the intercept here, the x-intercepts of the parabola graph correspond with the x-coordinates of the turning point. And then now the x-coordinate or the axis of symmetry of the parabola is really the point of inflection. So that means if you can just use these values, -1 and then +2, that divided by 2, that's going to give you 1/2. So this is the axis of symmetry of the parabola graph, which is the point of intersection, right? So you can solve those kind of questions. And then we know the ones on tangent, again, you have to do your f prime here and then substitute that point of contact. So here they're asking that has the maximum gradient. Now know that the maximum gradient occurs at the point of inflection. So if they just come there and say, calculate, determine the equation or of the tangent at that occurs at the maximum gradient. The maximum gradient can occur at the point of inflection, meant to say. Also, the minimum gradient can occur at the point of inflection, right? So it's based on what type of graph do you have. If you have a graph that is a less than 0, then you'll have a maximum point. But then if your graph is a greater than 0, then you'll have a minimum point, right? Because a greater than 0, your graph looks like this, right? Then if you have to draw a parabola that corresponds to that, then it will go like this. So the parabola that corresponds to this one. So you see, this one will have a maximum value. So remember this point here, the point of inflection, the y-coordinate of the point of inflection is actually representing the minimum gradient and also the what? The maximum gradient. So if it's like this concave down, it's representing the max gradient. And then if it's concave up, it's representing the minimum gradient. Because remember, f prime x is the gradient graph, right? So f prime x is indicating the gradient of the cubic graph. Then this one, no excuses. I would count that 15 marks in. I would count, so I already have 80, so 80 plus 15, that's about 95. So I'm at 95 marks. So it's just a matter of picking. I know with this one, learners don't even practice this one. A lot of you don't even practice this one because you're just like, we won't get it. But then here, guys, you just apply the same principles for what you call for cubic functions, right? So you're still applying differential calculus. So there's a way to get this one, right? They say determine the width of the box such that the cost to build the box is a minimum. So if you are given this, you can quite get this one by just if let's say maybe you are not able to show that the cost to construct a box can be calculated by this, right? But then that's 90W, the W representing the width. There's also a way to get the questions in 9.2 by just taking whatever that they need you to prove here. So you can just, if you're not able to show 9.1, you can just use whatever that they give you here. In most of the cases, it's always like that, whereby you have to use whatever that you've been asked to prove here to get this one. Now we know if they say minimum, then you just take whatever and then f prime x equated to 0. But then since this is 6 marks, maybe it might not be as easy as that, right? So, but then in most of the cases, just check if you can at least get that question. If it allows you to do that, to just use the value from here to get whatever there, you can just use that. And then even if you just do that, you can maybe score yourself 2 marks or 3 marks. Who knows? Just don't leave the questions like that. Just try to attempt. Even from here, you can just try to write this length times breadth, length times base times height times whatever. Then you can score a bit of marks there. But I don't want to talk much about this because a lot of you have just lost hope on this question. And this is not a question that you can really much predict, because they can get so much creative with these questions. Then, okay, just go to question 10 and then try to answer your probability, right? So with probability, you know that you can get these ones, right? So usually with this one, the first two questions are easier to get. How many possible 10-digit telephone numbers could be formed? We are trying to form what? They will tell you that we are trying to form a 10-digit code. So obviously, if digits may be repeated, that would be 10 to the exponent of 10. So I also did this question. I'll drop the link for this question, so if you want to check it out. And then, yeah, it's basically a question on counting principles, where I did a bunch of these questions, so you can go check it out. Then, yeah, you can get the 7 marks. You can pretty much score yourself the 7 marks. But then let's say now, let's say now we just want to be able to get at least 5 marks from that, so that it gives us the 100, right? So we are at 100 over 150, right? And then from here we have this probability. So this probability can be anything from a Venn diagram, or they can ask you to do a tree diagram, or it can be that basic probability whereby you need to use complementary events, you need to use a independent events, meant to say. So whereby you need to use one of these formulas, right? So you just need to revise the conditions where to use these formulas, right? And then also there's the one on mutual events and not mutually exclusive events. Then PA or B, which has a formula PA plus. So these formulas are given. These formulas are also given. So you don't have to memorize anything here. These formulas are just given. You just need to know the conditions in which they apply. So you can practice anything from your Venn diagram, your tree diagram, your contingency table, maybe. Yeah. So you have all those formulas here. Do we have those formulas? We don't have the formulas on probability. Okay, so on probability, we are only given the definition, or the definition of probability, we are also given this. So the only formulas that are given on probability is the definition of probability, and also the ones on if events are mutually exclusive or not mutually exclusive. So that means you'd have to know the one on independent events, okay? So yeah, you'd have to know this one. You'd have to know this one, and also the one on complementary events, right? So let's say we bag in that 8 marks, right? We bag in that 8 marks. So solving this question just by mainly focusing on questions that are obvious to get. So we can end up with 108 marks. So 108 over 150, that will give us 72%. So 108, that's 72%. Now 72% is a level 6, right? Now, considering that you might have made some mistakes, right? Because you might say that I got those questions, but then maybe you made a few mistakes. So you can fall off at level 4, right? You can fall off at about 65%, and then you end up with a level 5, meant to say, can fall off at level 5, right? So we end up with a 65%. It is still a decent mark, guys. And then if you are just out there, even getting those questions that we are scared of, maybe you are at 90 to 90%, and then if you are just a bookworm, then you got 100%. That's your level 7, right? So we always encourage, guys, that you always aim higher, right? But then remember, I always say this, guys, always have a goal. When you go into an exam, you know what you are capable of. So practice very hard, and always go there with a plan, right? Don't just write an exam. When you write an exam, you know that maybe in in prelim you manage to get a level 4 or a level 5, go there with the plan of now I want level 6, right? And how am I going to get level 6? By answering questions like this, right? So you go there with the plan. You are not just writing and then expecting that I'll get whatever mark that I'll get. So with me, I knew the marks that I was going to get, not exactly the marks that I was going to get, but then I had this idea that I know that I'm going to fall in the 80s, so I'm going to fall in the 90s for maths and physics. So because I know the things that I've answered, I know the things that I'm sure of, right? So always have that in mind. Have a plan. Don't just write your exam. Have a plan as to how you're going to approach the questions, and then also when you are practicing there, try to mark yourself, try to mark the work. If you cannot mark yourself, try to get a friend that will mark for you, and then try to see the marks that you are obtaining for the past exam papers. Mostly if you can practice about 3 exam papers, and then you can see that you are consistently getting a level 5, 60%, then it is most probable that you'll get that 60% when you're writing your final exam, right? So because the questions won't be far different from what you are seeing here. It is November question papers, and they're always structured like that, right? So always have a plan when you are writing your exam papers, and then aim for that. Have an aim to say that I want to get 60%, I want to get 70%, and work on that, Because if you are just writing or just studying there without any plan, you are just simply studying and then expecting anything to happen. So whether you get a level 2, a level 3, you are not really concerned. But if you have a plan, then you know that I need to push harder. When you're practicing question papers and you're consistently getting a 40%, now you know you need to drill on those topics that are giving you a challenge. You need to sit on those topics and then practice them harder so that your marks improve. So that's the way you study, guys. Keep on practicing exam papers and mark yourself. So, you know, when you download papers, download them along with the memo, right? But then do not be tempted to always go check the memo. Just have a question paper, the memo aside, set that 3 hour, write the exam as if you were writing in the exam hall. And then when you are finished writing, mark yourself using the memo, and then mark yourself fairly, guys. Do just be strict on yourself when you are marking, because take it in your head, they won't be lenient with you. You are just a number there, you are just a statistic. You won't be writing your name in that exam. So you need to be strict on yourself the way they'll be strict on your paper. So mark according to your memo, and then have true results about yourself, and then go through the question papers again. If you have to redo the question, maybe at a later stage, say maybe it's Tuesday now, you do that question paper, then on Thursday you revisit the question paper to see if you're gonna score a better mark, you can do that, right? But then that is the strategy that will enable you to improve on your marks, right? And then also, again, guys, it is much better to practice with exam papers rather than sitting all day, all night with your exam, with your textbook. Because given, maybe, for example, let's say given 2 hours, let's say I did not study the day before, given 2 hours to just flip over a textbook or just practice exam papers, I'll definitely practice an exam paper, because I know chances are if I practice with an exam paper, 90% of the time I will find something that is related to what will come out in an exam. But we know with textbook questions, you do those textbook questions, you find that not even 20% of the things that you did there really appear in your exam paper. So try to always practice with something that will increase your chances of passing the exam. So if you were to play, I always make this analogy to say, if you were to play against Barcelona, you wouldn't be out there practicing with Jomo Cosmos. You see, you will go there trying to find a team that will match up the standard, right? Maybe practice, play a friendly match with Real Madrid, or play a friendly match with Liverpool. You see, something that is along those standards. So that is always the case. Do not practice with your textbook questions while you are out there set to write an exam. You cannot bring a knife to a gunfight. No. So yeah. So with all that being said, guys, that is it. So if you can just go out there with the aim of at least getting over 100 marks, right? So you are out there with the aim of getting over 100 marks. So just go and nail that exam. Go and practice harder. The topics that you know that you are not strong on, focus on them. The ones that you know that you already have them in your mind, you already excelling on them, just brush up on them, and then try to focus more on the topics that are giving you a challenge, so as to increase your chances of passing that exam. So with all that being said, guys, okay. That's it. That's it. So we can even try to go through another paper here just before I leave. Let's just go through another paper just to solidify on the or on the evidence of the strategy to say that whatever that I mentioned is just the way it is, right? So you can see again with your question one here, you have your basic solve for x. So you know with this one, you have to start by factorizing this and then equate each bracket to 0. Then again with 1.1.2, we see the same trend, correct to 2 decimal places, right? So we know that we have to use our quadratic equation. And once again, here we can see our inequality, but then it's not in standard form. So we have to take this -4, transpose it this side, and then we solve here, and then we get, so again, look at the sign. The sign is facing that side. And then if the sign is facing that side, we know that the resulting inequality will be, so always have that in mind, guys. I see a lot of people, they spend a lot of time trying to think about this. So you know that if the signs are facing that side, that's how you're gonna have it. You're gonna have your minimum x value here, your maximum x value here. Then because they used less than or equal to, I'm also gonna use that, right? And then that's how you go about it. And then here, still the same approach. We can see that this is third form. So to get rid of this, we need to square both sides. And then yes, you see this one here. Solve for x simultaneous. We have 2y is equals to 3 plus x, right? And then yes, this is a nice one, because looking at this one, we can see that y here has a coefficient of 2, but then x here only has a coefficient of 1. So it would make sense to make x the subject of the formula if we have to approach this one. Because look at this, if we try to make y the subject of the formula, it's divided by 2, divided by 2, divided by 2. Shucks. Now we have what you call fractions, right? So if we have fractions, this is now complicated. You are at a dead end. So do not approach it like that. Now try to make what? Try to make x the subject of the formula. You'll have x is equals to 2y minus 3. Now you can call this your equation number 3. Since this is equation number 1, this is equation number 2. Now, if you have equation number 3, where there's x in equation number 2, you can substitute by this. And then everything is nice like that. Now, remember, I told you the question in here can either be on exponents or on nature of roots. So you can see this time around, they gave you nature of roots, right? So you see, still it's backing up the evidence, right? So question 2, we are given geometric series this time. So they decided to start with geometric series. That means in question 3, now they will give you your arithmetic sequence, which again will come with your quadratic number pattern. So remember, quadratic number pattern. Okay, so here they decided to give you quadratic number pattern alone, and then they gave you another question 4, which is now based on the linear pattern or the arithmetic pattern, right? So here they just decided to give you 3 whole questions on patterns, right? So that should be 3 marks for you, because if they just decide to give you 3 questions on patterns, wow. And then from question 5 again, we have what? We have our hyperbola graph. Again, the questions that we spoke about, equations of the asymptote, the domain, range, determine the coordinates of the x-intercept, determine the coordinates of the y-intercept. Now, what are they saying? Draw. So it's a sketch, right? So what question they didn't ask from the ones I told you? It's only the one on axis of symmetry, right? Then again, question 6, we have so you see, this time we are given logarithmic graph. Remember, I told you they can give you log and then you need to relate it to exponential, or they give you exponential, you need to relate it to log, right? So either way, it will be exponential log, right? So you can also have these ones. So here they're speaking about the inverse. The inverse is obviously the exponential graph. And then now your question 7, you are given your parabola and also the straight line. In most of the cases, when they give you the parabola, they give you with a straight line there. And then also here, you can answer these questions like that. And then question 8, again, it's on your financial maths, which if you are able to read your questions correctly, then you should also get these ones, right? So how many years will it take for an investment for an amount of 75,000 to accrue to 116,253.50 in an account earning interest at 6.8% PA compounded quartile? So here we know this is even 4 marks. We are not making any monthly deposits or any regular deposits. So we know the formula to use is the one for compound interest, right? So if they do not mention anything on monthly installments or anything on regular payments, then you know the formula that applies is for compound. So you just need to be careful with the compounding periods here, because for this one, they're saying quartile, right? So here, again, reducing balance method. So it's that formula. A farmer bought a tractor for 980,000. So this becomes your what? Your P, right? And then this becomes your R, which you need to write it as R over 100. This is your number of years. So what are you calculating? The book value, which is A. So straightforward question. Tabo wants to save 450,000 future value, because he wants to save. So that's in the future. As a deposit to buy a house on 30 June 2018, he deposited a fixed amount. Now we already know fixed amount, future value formula, right? Tabo bought a house costing 1,500,000. He obviously took a loan. I do not even need to read the whole statement. He obtained a home loan for the balance of the purchase. So you obtained a home loan, present value. And then question 9, again, a mark for everyone. And then 9.2.1, another mark for everyone. 9.2.2, first you have to do what? Make sure that this is in the correct form for derivation, and then you get those marks. Then question 10, it's on cubic functions. So cubic functions, again, no excuse. Maybe this question on nature of roots, if you do not understand what needs to be done, can give you a problem here. But then otherwise, you should get all these marks here. Then question 11, the ones that you don't want to discuss. Yeah, these ones, yeah. If you know, you know these ones. Then question 12, A and B are independent events. It is further given. So yeah, this is what I was talking about when I say those basic probability questions. So you know that for this ones, you have to use that formula for P, A, or B, the one on mutually exclusive events or what. So we know that if it's mutually exclusive events, you simply have to prove. So here, they're just asking you, are A and B mutually exclusive events? So you'd say no, because for mutually in order for events to be mutually exclusive, the PA and B has to be equal to 0, right? So no intersection for that. For mutually exclusive events, you have event A like this and you have event B like this. There's nothing in between, right? So there's no intersection between the two events. So once there's an intersection, once there's a value for A and B, then you know it's not mutually exclusive, which is why it's even 1 mark. So to motivate your answer, you just say PA and B is not equal to 0. It's not equal to 0. So that's why it's not mutually exclusive. Then here they say determine the probability of P only A. So you'd have to calculate that one, obviously using the formula. So if you were to use the formula, PA and PA or B is equals to PA plus PB minus PA and B, right? So if you can use this formula here, you can, so they gave you P of B only, you can try to get P of B, and then, yeah, whatever that you're gonna do here. But then, yeah, remember, I'm not solving questions. I get tempted to solve the questions. So that's not what it's all about today. Okay, then we have this. After that, you have the basic probability. Then you have your counting principles here, which are these ones you should be able to get also. Then your total out of 1/5. So even here, just browsing through the question paper here, I can see that you can easily get a 110 marks here. And then you can be seated at your level 6. Then if you are aiming at level 7, aim for 130, 140 marks. And then if you are just crazy like some of my friends that got 100%, not me. Hey, I was not crazy, guys. Hey. Joking, I'm not saying the ones that get 100% are crazy. They're so dedicated. We love them. Then again, when we look at this one, 2022, the one that was written last year, so you see, same trend. So if I was speaking with a learner last year and then telling them, go practice with these 2 past papers here, you see that the learner could have easily passed, because look at these 2 papers here, the previous 2 papers. They are exactly the same. So remember, a learner last year in 2022 did not know that this paper is coming. But then I just advised the learner, go practice 2021 and 2020, right? And then you'd be fine. Look at this. It is still the same trend. For the first one here, this is solved for X. Already, this is in standard form. You just take each and every bracket, equate it to 0. Correct to 2 decimal places. You already know, quadratic. Then this one, we can see that it's on what? Inequality. But then look at our inequality now. It's facing which side? It's facing that direction, right? So if it's facing this direction here, if it's facing this direction, it needs to be X less than or X greater than. So here being the minimum value of X and here being the maximum value of X, because now the inequality is facing the right. So just like that. And then here, for this one, you would try to take this out as what? So you have X, and then this will come out as 7X 1/2. Then you take this 12 here, this side, and then equal to 0. So this is still quadratic in a way, because remember, the way they did it is that the one in here, this is 1, and then this is the half of 1. So it's half. So usually you find it like this. Usually you have something. This is the same as me having 7x plus 12, right? Because if I have a degree of 2 here, I have a degree of 1. If I have a degree of 1 here, I must have a degree of half. So you're still solving it the same way. Then solve for X. Again here, this one, a bit complicated, but look at this one, straightforward. Which one do you make the subject of the formula here? You make Y the subject of the formula because it is the one with the lowest coefficient. Then you just solve like this, like that. So this one was even 5 marks because It was so easy, right? So now you have your equation for y. Can take your y, substitute it in equation number 2, and then you run with it. Then again, question here, if it's not on nature of roots, it's on exponents. Look at this. This is on exponents. This is on exponents. So guys, it's so easy to predict this. Then your question 2, geometric sequence. Then your question 3, quadratic sequence. Oh, so this seems to be the trend now. So geometric, then quadratic, then geometric, quadratic, but then be careful when they put in a quadratic, they might be hiding the arithmetic equation in there, right? So the quadratic equation might come with an arithmetic equation inside, right? Then because your first difference of the quadratic pattern is the arithmetic equation. Then question 4, we have your hyperbola, which again, no excuse. Determine the values of P and Q. The P and Q that we are talking about here are the asymptotes. And then they want the coordinates of the x-intercept. Write down the x-coordinate of the x-intercept of G. If G is now translated, so this translation is 3 units to the left because this is x plus 3. When there's a plus, it's to the left. Then the equation of the axis of symmetry, so you see this question is there, right? And then now they want determine the values of x for which this and this would be equal to that. So here you can even solve this, right? You can just cross multiply here and try to solve for x. You'll find the value there. Then when we continue, we find our parabola. Now they decided to mix this parabola with your what you call your exponential graph. So we can see there. So that means they'll be asking questions on the parabola and also on the exponential graph. So either way, you should be able to get that one. And then here we are given a straight line. This one was the most easiest question in history, because now you are given just a straight line and you are given the inverse of a straight line. The inverse of a straight line will be a straight line, right? So as you can see here, this is g of x and then this is g prime x. They intersect here. You would have to find the equation of this. Now we know if I'm given this, g of x is equals to 2x plus 6, and then they want me to get the inverse. This is y, right? 2x plus 6. The inverse says where there's y, put x, where there's x, put y. So x here, and then 2y plus 6. Then 2y is equals to x minus 6 divided by 2, divided by 2, divided by 2. Now I have my y is equals to half x minus 3. So you see, it is still in the form of y is equals to mx plus c. So it is still a straight line, right? It's unlike the exponential and the logarithmic. So if you inverse an exponential, it becomes log, but if you inverse a log, it becomes exponential. This one, if you inverse a straight line, it still becomes a straight line. Then this is on that. This one would be quite easy to get. Calculate the coordinates of A. Calculate the length of AB. Find the coordinates for A here. Find the coordinates for B. Use your distance formula. Calculate the area of triangle ABC. Where's ABC? ABC, you just close off this part. Okay. Then question 6, you are given financial maths here. So also again with financial maths, if you are able to just read the question and apply the necessary equations or the necessary formulas, the ones that you need to apply for the particular question, then you're gonna get that one. So question 7, again, a mark for everyone. This one is speaking on minimum gradient, blah, blah, blah. So again, here you are given your points. So this gives me vibes of, I don't know, maybe it can be Okay, they say has a minimum gradient at the point -1 is to -7. For which values of x will g be concave up? Nah, nice one. So you see this one. Yes, minimum gradient, right? Remember what I just spoke about on that one. I said if you have an equation like a graph like this, then if you try to draw your, okay, not this one, if you have this, if you try to draw the parabola here, which is the gradient equation, then it will look like this, right? So intercepts going like this here. So intercept here, and then here intercept. Then at this point, you'd have the minimum value here, right? Now they're saying the tangent to this is at that point and has a minimum gradient at the point -1 is to -7. Remember, the minimum gradient occurs here. The minimum gradient will always occur at the point of inflection, right? So now they're asking for which values of x will g be concave up. Already by this coordinate here, can you see that they just gave you the point of inflection? Why? Because we know the minimum gradient occurs at the point of inflection, right? It occurs at the point of inflection. So now that we know that x is equal to -1, we want the points where it will be concave up. Look at this graph. It's concave up after this point, after the point of inflection. So I just go ahead and say x greater than -1 because I know this, right? So you might be asking, but this is 4 marks. How are you going to write it? Hey, I know. So if you know, it's 1 mark for this, 2 mark for this, and another 2 mark for being smart. Then question 8, the graph of y is equal to f prime x is that. So with this one, you can see these are the questions that I always tell you to look for, right? Sometimes they give you a parabola graph and then they start to ask you questions on cubic function, which is very important to know this relationship here. Know this relationship between your cubic function and the parabola graph, because when they start to pop questions on that, yeah, it gets really tricky. So you just have to know the coordinates that are given here. These are the same x coordinates for the turning points, guys. These are the same coordinates for the turning point. The axis of symmetry that you're going to get from this one, this axis of symmetry here, that you're going to get from this, which you can get from just saying -1/3 plus 1/2, is actually representing the point of inflection. The x coordinate only is representing the point of inflection. Now, if you wanted the y coordinate of the point of inflection, you'd obviously have to have the cubic graph for that. Then all that. Then if you understand that relationship, you'd be able to solve these questions. Then question 9, we have determined the minimum distance between the point 10 is to 2 and a point on F. So this one, speaking about the minimum distance between the point 10 is to 2, right? So also this one is on whatever that you hate. I don't know what problem do you have with these questions, but then let me not discuss them. But then again, if they're speaking about minimum, so they're speaking about minimum here distance, you know that you have to apply your differential calculus, derive this, and then to f prime, and then try to get to the points there, right? So minimum distance between the point 10 is to 2 and a point on F, right? And a point on F. So I won't discuss it. Then question 10, A, B, and C are 3 events. The probability of these events or any combination of them occurring is given in the Venn diagram. So guys, for anyone who's interested in solving these questions, I can just make a video where I just solve this type of questions. So only for those that are interested, the ones that are out there trying to get boom, 100%. So, but then if you can, in all honesty, you can pass with very good marks without even trying to attempt these questions. But then if you want to get those questions, we can get down to them. Then 10.1.1, if it is given that the probability that at least one of the events will occur is 0.83. So this one is on Venn diagram. Remember, I said basic probability, Venn diagram, tree diagram. So those are the ones you should look at. And then also contingency table. Though I haven't seen contingency table a lot in grade 12, I usually see contingency table in grade 11. I don't know what's the deal with contingency table in grade 12, or is it not examined in grade 12? I don't know. Then we have this. We have this. And then you can get all those answers there. You can just get everything there. And then here, it was not really a tough one, this one. If you read everything correctly there, you should be able to get this. And then also here, browsing through the question, just browsing through the question, I am confident that you can walk out with about 110 or 115 marks there, right? So, yeah. So just practice, guys. Just take out the time to practice these questions. If you can just start out with these ones that I've put in here, then I'm pretty sure on Friday you'll have a better chance of facing that exam than any other kid, right? So with all that being said, chop, guys. Keep on watching the videos where I do other questions. I'll be posting a video later on counting principles. So go check it out. And then subscribe, guys. Get your friends, get your classmates to subscribe to the channel. Let's push it to 1K subscribers and beyond, guys. So that's it. That's the culture. I'll also be doing another video for paper 2 where I'll just be reviewing paper 2 and walking you through solving that paper 2 question. So yeah, see you next time, guys. Ciao.